Welcome everyone to the Asher Marketing Podcast. We provide a wide range of services, including media planning, video production, creative solutions, digital and social media strategies, website development, public relations, and printing. To find out more, visit asheragency.com.
My guest is Christian Ponce. Christian, it's good to see you.
Anthony, it's great to see you. It's wonderful to see you again. How are you?
I'm doing great. Well, thanks so much for doing this. You and I go somewhat way back, but it's been a while since I've seen you, so it's great to reconnect.
Yes.
So I want to start even before you and I first connected. On this podcast, one of the things we like to talk about is everyone's career path. And I know a little bit of that, and I've done a little bit of research on you since you agreed to do the podcast, but I'd like to hear it from your perspective. When you were first thinking about careers, what were you considering, and where did you go from there? Did you stay on the path you thought you'd go on, or did you pivot?
Actually, that's a great question. I didn't. So I'll start by who I am and what I come from. Obviously, this accent is not from Indiana, right? So I was born and raised in Honduras, and I came to the U.S. as an international student in '95. Okay. And I came here to study broadcasting. I wanted to be believe it or not, at the time, I wanted to be a TV news anchor. But then in the major, I took a class in advertising, and I was just fascinated by it. I always knew that I liked advertising. I grew up in Honduras. My uncle had an ad agency, and so I grew up listening to jingles and whatever. But man, when I took that class, it would just confirm what I really thought could be good. So I decided to graduate, obviously, with my communications and broadcast emphasis, and then pursued a master's in integrated marketing communications. And that was the first shift. Now, the question is how I ended up in higher education, right?
Yeah.
Higher education
that's where
marketing.
You spent most of your career is in higher ed.
Right, higher ed, yes. So my first job out of college was through being an international student. I was offered an OPT, optional practicum training, to study here, to work here for a year. And there was a small college, Berean College, offered me a job, and I was a bilingual admissions counselor. That was my first job.
Okay.
And long story short, the ad agency who had the account eventually hired me. They're Cabot Associates now in Indianapolis, and I spent some time with them. Then I founded my own advertising agency, Ponce Publicidad, in Indianapolis, working on multicultural marketing, specifically serving some clients like PNC Bank and others, and it was a lot of fun. But you probably remember the crisis of 2008, that financial issue with that. It was very hard in agencies, and many of them, even big shops, unfortunately closed doors. So I saw it as an opportunity to go back to my roots. And one of my clients, Global University, hired me back and as to set up their Marcom team. They didn't have one. They have an enrollment team and they had an advancement team, but they didn't have a marketing communications team. So I became the university director of Marcom, and that's how I came back to higher ed. And I never looked back. That was in 2010, and since 2010, I've been in higher ed.
Yeah. So what are you passionate about with higher ed marketing? Why you could do a lot of things, but why do you stay in the higher ed world?
Higher ed marketing, I think that I spent my first decade, really, quite frankly, my first decade was in the advertising agency sector, and I loved it. I was passionate about it. But I think it came to a point that I figured that this idea of marketing higher education can be life transformational, if you will, for students like myself, for people like me. I'm a first generation college graduate. My parents didn't go to college. My sisters and I were the first ones to go. And quite frankly, I mean, it's evident the change in our lives that we have now versus the one that my parents had, to be honest.
Yeah, and you and I share that. I always say that I don't know where I would be if not for my college education, but I know it probably wouldn't be good. As a matter of fact, funny timing, because just this weekend, there was an instructor who I was starting to fail out of a school that was pretty hard to fail out of in Massachusetts. And I had an instructor tap me on the shoulder and gave me the right kind of message at the right time. His name was Bruce Gilman. And I don't know if he knows how much he changed my life, but I think I found him this weekend. So I emailed him. So,
great.
Finally giving credit where credit is due. But the reason I mentioned that is that's what makes me passionate about it, is that personal experience of seeing how it changed my life and wanting to make that possible for other students, whether through the teaching that I do or through marketing and helping colleges and universities tell their story.
100%. I mean, I marketed in the past, checking accounts and meals and lunches and value menus and oil changes. And that's fun. And you can have a blast doing that stuff in advertising. You can really have a blast. Yeah. But quite frankly, the product that I sell now, if you will, the service is just so incredibly meaningful.
Yeah, for sure. So, Christian, you're at ISU now, and many people will recognize Indiana State when they hear that name, especially, those who know Larry Bird. That's probably one of the first associations they have with ISU. Right. But for those who may be less familiar, tell me, when people ask you about your role at ISU and you talk about the university, how do you describe ISU?
So I'll say ISU. Well, I'll say Indiana State. We really want to really claim that name, that ownership of Indiana State University. It's a regional public university in Terre Haute, Indiana. We are a few miles down the border from Illinois. And I would describe it as a regional public with a great combination, if you will, of the offerings of a large public, but also the benefits of a smaller private, right? The campus is very easy to navigate. There's great programs. There's great attention from faculty to students. In fact, we just finalized a video of a student who transferred to Indiana State from a large public. And he goes on to how important it is for him to have that personalized attention from the faculty and from his professors, and an easy campus to navigate. So it's a great thing for those who feel that's important to them, if you will.
Yep. And this firsthand, some of the challenges that exist in higher ed marketing today. Families are rightfully so. They're asking about ROI. You have many prospects who believe that they can sort of DIY an education. I don't believe that personally. I don't think you can do it as well as with a college education, but that's one of the perceptions. And of course, there's more competition. When you and I started our career, universities were only competing with other universities in their geographic area. Now you're really competing against the world thanks to online. So how are you tackling those challenges? What are you doing to help Indiana State really stand out in what's become a crowded and complex marketplace?
No, absolutely. I think that's a fantastic question, and quite frankly, a very difficult one to answer. And I think all of us, CMOs and people in marketing or promoting universities and higher education as a whole, are really having to have a good conversation internally and trying to figure out, number one, what is it that we are truly selling, if you will? And number two, who is our competition, right? And right now we're working with a firm in marketing, and then they presented with my VP of enrollment management, and they presented about the competitor actually is non-college at all. If you think about it, because you have a lot of students considering the trades, and that's okay. A lot of students are not going to college. You have a lot of online options, and you have options that actually they're free. I mean, honestly, in terms of, so the question is, what is the value of higher education, of traditional higher education? And to us, quite frankly, the value is that we want to really help students and communities move upwards when it comes to in society. I think it's the social mobility moving forward and upward. It's absolutely paramount. So the outcomes become really important, right? You come here because you want to really get those skills of critical thinking and all of that, but at the end of the day, you want a job.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's one of the advantages of going to an institution like Indiana State is, a young person, you're going to grow up in a bubble. We all do. You're going to grow up with your family and your friends. And I think one of the best things about college, at least this was true for me, is it gets you out of that bubble and you get to bump shoulders with people who maybe came from a different background. Maybe you have a fellow student who's from Honduras and you don't even know where
100%.
Honduras is in the world. You might run into some folks, if you're a student athlete, you're going to meet folks from around the country. And that allows you to really understand, at least in my mind, who you are and what you're capable of in a way that staying in the bubble doesn't allow.
No, I think that's absolutely true. I laughed when you said, where's Honduras at? A few years ago, about 5 years ago, somebody asked me, where are you from originally? And I said, from Honduras. I kid you not, they asked me, what part of Europe is that in? I think they were thinking Hungary or something.
Yeah.
I thought it was hilarious. I thought it was funny.
Well, maybe it's moved since you were last there. Who knows?
You never know.
Yeah. So I know you recently worked on a branding initiative for Indiana State to really focus in on that story. Talk a little bit, if you don't mind, about what was that like? What did you learn out of that? What was that process like? And how are you using that moving forward?
No, absolutely. Thank you for that. Well, I'm very new at Indiana State. I joined the team in September of 2025. So I've been here a little over 4 months now. So a lot of that work was already done when I came. So I was extremely fortunate to come here, finalize a little bit of that, and then roll out the campaign. But I'll say that it was a lot of discovery meetings. I know there were roundtable discussions, focus group surveys to truly understand what is that brand promise that we can deliver, right? Yeah. And I'll tell you that the university came up with a few brand pillars that I think are really important because they're authentic to who we are. And one of them is, for example, future focused. We really want to focus on the future. Unwavering support is important to us as a university. It's another brand pillar, right? So speaking of those, I think we have to have an understanding that we want the community, and when I mean the community, the university community, but the larger community at large, to understand what we stand for, what we want our brand to mean. I think that matters a lot. Yeah. So from then on, Anthony, everything that we do is focused and is built on those core values and promises, if you will, those brand pillars. Yeah. We need to remain focused. We need to remain strategic centered on those things. And that is, it comes all the way down from the strategic plan that the present leadership put forward. So my job as executive director of university marketing is to ensure that our marketing plan is aligned with the strategic plan for the university, but also that it communicates everything we do in a way that it makes sense and people understand it. Does that make sense?
It does. And it gives you that true north that you can go back to. And it actually makes everything else a little easier because you know at your core what message it is you need to reinforce. I've worked without sort of that true north, and it's much more difficult when you're trying to make it up as you go along every single time. And I really like what you said, Christian, about how you had focus groups and other sessions, discovery sessions, because I think a lot of times when people who don't work in marketing, when they hear about a branding initiative, they think it's the marketing team going off in a dark corner somewhere and deciding what the story is. But in my experience, and I'm certain this is consistent with yours, it's really drawing out from, in your case, people like faculty and staff, and from the students, 100%. Talking to student families about what does Indiana State mean to you, and then looking for trends and looking for the part of that allows you to have a jumping off point for the stories you want to tell.
100%. And I think any brand strategy that is successful needs to be believable.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's so important that early work is foundational. You need to focus on that so you can create authentic marketing.
Yeah, and it's especially true with the prospect audiences you're trying to reach. I laughed a little because just last week, so I'm teaching a marketing class right now, and I was talking to my students, and I said to them that their generation has a better BS meter than any generation before. And if it's not true, it's going to be a negative for the brand. So you have to look for those authentic touch points. And, understanding universities don't just communicate with young people. They communicate with the families of young people. You're going to have older students who are going to be looking at online and graduate degrees. But I think all of us today we really want that authenticity. We want to know, how are you different and how do you back that up in the real world? And then it's up to the marketing team to be disciplined enough to stick to that and tell a story that reflects it.
100%.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you're just getting on board there at Indiana State and, coming in the middle of a brand process. What are some of the other things that you would say are your goals over the next 6 to 12 months as you get established?
So understanding that, to me, I have a mantra that used to be that marketing was everything. At least we used to think as marketers, marketing's everything, but now everything is marketing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I see my role as creating true integration opportunities for our marketing, whether that is, and really understanding, and we'll touch on that later, but really understanding the marketing goes beyond promotion. So is that understanding that, okay, are your brand pillars of future focused or unwavering support, empowering opportunity, advancing together, those brand pillars that we have, are those being expressed on the campus tour script?
Yeah.
Are your campus tour guys speaking to that? What does that mean? How do they live it out? That's integration, right? That's marketing. And other opportunities as well, working, collaborating, meeting with my faculty, my department chairs, my deans, understanding that so they know what brand means and how they can deliver that through, really, quite frankly, the education that we provide.
100%.
Right?
It's probably the most important reinforcement of the brand is what happens in the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, when I worked years and years ago with Ivy Tech Community College, we actually went around the state and had open forums with faculty and staff to share with them what we were trying to do from a branding standpoint. And the message was, this isn't a marketing initiative. It's a college initiative where if you don't buy into it, if you don't believe what we're saying, then this is not going to work. And if you have questions about what we're trying to do, we need to know what those are, because you as faculty and staff, you're on the front lines. You're the ambassadors for this. We just give you some wind at your back to make it, easier to tell the story. And that can be difficult. As you well know from working in higher ed, faculty and staff, they're appropriately tough audiences. They want to know, how does this help students? How does this help the institution? So you got to make a case. You got to sell it to them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I want to pivot, Christian, to some quicker hit questions that bring forward some of the things we've talked about a little bit. The first one is about careers and what you believe it takes to have a successful career. You've been in a couple of different industries, agency side, higher ed. You've done a lot of things in your career. But what would you say is the key to having a successful and fulfilling career from your perspective?
That's a great question. I think you have to understand that there needs to be a higher call to what you do, right? Otherwise, a career is just a job. It just you meet ends, and that's about it. Mm-hmm. To me, if I think about the opportunities that I've had and the opportunities that others could have, then it starts creating a lot of this idea of doing meaningful work. And I always keep that in mind. And that's why I think I've lasted so long in higher ed, which has been 15 years now, is because I know that in the end, what we are doing matters. It matters, and it has an impact not only for the families of those students, but for the society in general, if you think about it. You're creating economic impact beyond belief. You're creating opportunities and advancing opportunities upward. You are giving opportunities of purchasing power that was not there and would not be there without these graduates getting their degrees and obtaining jobs. So what we're doing matters a lot.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm going to ask you a follow-up question to that one. If somebody's listening to this and they're just getting started in their career, or they're considering what career they want to pursue, how do you discover that purpose? It may be that you luck into it, but is there anything you've done or anything you would recommend so people might be able to get to where they ideally are suited a little faster?
That's a great question because I think that generations have changed tremendously. I'm a Gen X, so the expectation, even with my generation, was that you went to college and then you find yourself a good career and and then you stick to it for the next 35, 40 years. Well, data shows me that kids are not, that's not the case anymore. They're
Yeah.
moving.
Yeah.
So understanding that very important nuance. I'll say that what matters when you go to college is that you have a good skill set that you can transfer
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
one type field to another.
For sure. Well, and as a fellow member of Gen X, what I tell young people all the time is, I'm old Gen X. You're younger Gen X, I think.
Come on.
I tell people all the time that, when I started my career, my first job after I completed my college degree, I didn't have an email address and the company didn't have a website because those things didn't yet exist.
Right.
So, while I've stayed, I was an English major, so I was figuring it out for a few years. But even though most of my career has been in marketing, what I'm doing in 2026 is wildly different than what I was doing in, even 2006.
100%.
Yeah. Yeah.
100%. Imagine doing a podcast in the early 90s, unheard of.
Yeah. I still occasionally have people say, what's a podcast and where do I find them? But that's less common today than it was a few years ago. So maybe people actually find this person.
Right.
All right. Second quick hit question. What is a myth or misconception about the work that you do? And this could be a myth and misconception about Indiana State. It could be a myth about marketing. It could be a myth about higher ed. What's something that is untrue in your experience and you'd like to debunk the myth? Or maybe it's just something that's not well understood enough.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question, actually. I'll say that the main myth is that marketing is promotion, right? Mm-hmm. Marketing is way more than promotion. Promotion is actually I'll say 25% of the marketing activity. You do a lot of research. You need to find out about the products that you offer. You need to find out about how are you going to really get those products out of the shelf, if you will. The distribution of that. How are you going to price those products matters. Yeah. And now there's a P. The fifth P here in the 21st century is about people. Marketing is about people. People who receives your service and your product, and people who creates those services and those products. So marketing is not as simple as it sounds.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And I want to piggyback on a couple things you said. I love focusing on people. One of the things that I preach is that, you can have the greatest product in the world, but if you can't tie it back to how it impacts people, it's not going to sell. We have to 100%. Tell that story. People care a little bit about quality, and they care about, if we're talking about a manufactured product, they care about quality. They care about how yours is incrementally better or safer than the other one. But if you can't tie that back to a story about people, you're not going to get anywhere. The other thing that I really like in everything you said is you're talking about products. And a lot of people listen to this who don't work in higher ed are like, well, what does products mean in higher ed? They offer degrees. But today you can think about certificates. There's increasing demand in the market for short-term education. And as you mentioned, one of the places where higher ed needs to compete is I can get a short-term certification from Google and from all these private entities 100%. Who often provide them for free, right?
100%. Yeah.
So higher ed has to keep up and have a value proposition that says, here's why you want to obtain a certificate from us. And then, the distribution or the place piece, it can be online, it can be hybrid, it can be on campus. So as you mentioned, there's a lot more going on than what meets the eye here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think we're living through I think there's a pivot point that we're now all, kind of seeing and where we're going to go next. But I have tremendous hope in that, universities are doing the right thing and that they will continue serving society, which is what they were established to do anyway.
For sure. And, this is a tough thing to talk about, but there's a shakeout right now in higher ed. We're seeing institutions close because they don't have the resources or the creativity to keep up in this market. And, we're fortunate, you and I, to work with institutions that are ahead of that curve. But it's becoming really existential that colleges and universities understand this new market and the new perceptions of prospects. It's going to get tougher before it gets easier. And, you're fortunate if you're affiliated with a school that's thinking about that and working ahead of it.
Yes. Yeah.
And
we are.
Yeah. Yeah. I knew you would only be in a place that was. So there you go. All right. One more question for you. And this happens. We as marketers, we love our tools. We love to find new ways to get things done. What's something you use? And this doesn't have to be digital. It can be analog. Something that helps you be more effective, more productive in your work. Something that you think deserves a little bit of a shout out.
No, that's great. There's a couple of things number one, which is everybody at this by now would imagine that the immense majority of your audience know about ChatGPT. I love that tool. It really it helps me to stay on message when I'm writing emails or on tone, or it helps me to, if I need to draft, guided discussion questions for a focus group, I take seconds now as opposed to like hours that I used to. So it's become a tool that is really make my work more efficient. There's another one that I like called Elephant AI, and that's for KPIs, and it really helps you a lot. But I keep saying that these tools are fantastic, but they're tools. You still have to do the thinking. You still have to do the strategic work. Yeah. So, but they're fantastic. They're really helping a lot.
Yeah, I'm really glad you mentioned that, because I know a lot of marketers, especially those in creative roles, are a little reluctant to adopt AI. And I understand and respect why that is. But it's a tool. It is something that doesn't replace who you are. It doesn't replace your skills. No. I mean, one of the primary uses of AI for me is if there's something I'm doing where I don't add value, it's just a task that takes up time. If I can do that more efficiently, still get the end result, or let's be honest, a better end result that allows me to dive in more deeply to the things where I bring something to the equation, that's a better use of my time. And, from a writing standpoint, I came into this work as a writer. I was an English major, and I still greatly value the written word. I think it can move people. It can tap into the emotions. But what AI has done is it gets me away from a blank sheet of paper, so to speak, right? If I have something to work from, if I can prompt in a way that gets it started, it's very rarely, if ever, text in, text out. It's prompt in, something back that makes me go, sometimes I go, that's not it, but that helps me get to where I want to be. Or that's about 25% of the way there. Let me take it the rest of the way. That's how I think it's often best used in marketing.
That's awesome. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Well, Christian, I really appreciate your time. I appreciate you doing this. It's good to see you, even if not face-to-face, at least virtually so.
Thank you.
I wish you the best of luck as you move ahead at ISU.
Thank you so much. And thank you for the opportunity. And anytime you want to get together, we're here. You can, if you want to come down. You are in Fort Wayne, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so anytime you venture down here, just come on down.
I will do that. I'll wait till it's a little warmer, though.
Yes,
so when we're walking around campus, we're not freezing. So
that makes total sense. Thank you for the opportunity. It was great seeing you again, Anthony.
You too. And thanks to everyone who took the opportunity to listen to this episode of the Asher Marketing Podcast. We'll be back next time with another great guest, and we hope you'll join us then.
We'd love to hear your feedback. Feel free to reach out to us at hello@asheragency.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to our show on your favorite podcast platform. It really helps us reach more listeners. For additional resources and updates, visit our website at asheragency.com. Thanks for tuning in.